Welcome back. Former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng, MP for Spelthorne, joins me now. Kwasi, lovely to see you this morning.
See you.
So why are you standing down?
Well, I just thought after 14 years, it's quite a long time, and it's probably time to move on. And I think that happens in lots of people's
lives. Why now?
lives.
I mean, it doesn't show
personal...
that much confidence in the Tories,
Not
does it?
at all. It's a personal decision. And actually, many years ago, I remember writing a book where I thought we should have term limits for MPs, because I think people... The danger is that not that they leave too soon, but people stay on a bit too long. Was
it the case that the reaction to the mini-budget and everything that subsequently happened was so bruising?
Not really.
Has that had an impact? Because last year you wouldn't be saying that you were going to stand down this year.
Well, I've been thinking about it for a long time.
Have you? How long?
And there was, well, ever since the beginning of the Parliament, actually. I had thought, and I was Minister of State at that point, I had thought that, 3 terms, obviously we had more elections, but 15 years is probably, in this modern climate, a reasonable amount of time to be an MP. So a lot of the thinking about that was frankly, germinating in my mind before. But you're now one of 56 Tories to say they're standing down. I mean, your majority is what, about 18,000? Yeah, I'm confident I would have held the seat.
Really?
Yes, I am. I wouldn't be somebody who would have thought that I would lose.
But why are so many MPs jumping ship?
Well, they have lots of reasons. I mean, for a start, I think the fact that we're facing a difficult election has something to do with it. You've got to be honest about that. But the climate of being an MP, a lot of people are finding that difficult as well. It's a huge, stress on family life. I hate to say it, but I've never felt under any physical threat whatsoever. No. But I think a lot of colleagues, frankly, have.
Did you get a lot of abuse after the mini-budget?
Not really. I mean, 1 or 2 comments here and there. And I always use the public, people who know me knew I always use public transport.
Yeah, I know. You're always out and about.
Yeah, I'm always out and about. That's right. So I took that decision. And actually, for the first month or 2, the odd comment. And then that dies down. I think most people are very respectful. There's a story on the front of the Observer today saying the Tories have given up on the general election. So I'm wondering, presumably Rishi Sunak phoned you, begged you to stay on? No, not at all. I didn't hear anything from him. But really? I wouldn't expect that. Hang on. What, the Prime Minister didn't phone and say, you're a former Chancellor? No. I mean, he's busy, isn't he? He's doing his work. He's trying to get re-elected. But is he not phoning these MPs and saying, no, please, stick with me, stick with the 5-point plan? So I'm not sure that their outreach plan is necessarily working very effectively. Explain that to me. Well, I just don't think, that they've got the bandwidth to keep communicating with people in the way that they should. But of course, Do you mean with MPs or the public? Well, with MPs. I mean, you could see that with people like Robert Jenrick leaving the government. I mean, I don't know what conversations they had. But we've got to be honest and say, some of these personal, relationships probably need to be worked on. Is he not good at fostering good relations with his MPs? I mean, we had Cameron, didn't we, back in the day, sort of doing canapes and sandwiches every 5 minutes. I think it's always a challenge. And to be fair to Number 10, I have been invited to things, lots of things, actually. There are lots of events. I know, but it is intriguing that the Prime Minister wouldn't contact... No, I didn't. I mean, he was a Chancellor. So, to be fair to him, the day I was sacked as Chancellor, he did call me, and we had a very good conversation, and I see him occasionally. What did he say when he called you when he was sacked? Well, I mean, he just said, he commiserated, and he was a colleague, and he's somebody that I regard him as a friend. I mean, when he came into Parliament, he was clearly one of the very able people that had come in that election, among many. And I struck up a friendship with him. I thought he was a really good and capable MP, backbench MP, and then Minister. But then, are you disappointed with his performance as both Chancellor and indeed Prime Minister? I was intrigued to find out this week that the Treasury is now briefing smaller tax cuts, when only 5 minutes ago, Jeremy Hunt's sort of saying that he wants to channel his inner Nigel Lawson. So look, to be fair to Rishi, and I was responsible for this partly, he came in under massive pressure, and the markets were going crazy. He had to stabilise the situation. Jeremy Hunt, if you recall, was actually appointed by Liz Truss. I always point this out. People always think... Do we think that, Rishi Sunak really want to have Jeremy Hunt? Well, I don't know about that, but it's unusual, and I've said this before. Yeah. It's unusual for a new Prime Minister not to bring in their own Chancellor of the Exchequer. That's rare, as a matter of fact. Yes. And I think he was under a lot of pressure. And the situation that he found himself in was highly charged and difficult. And what he did, I think he did very well. He stabilised things. He was calm. He took a measured approach. He always said that would only be the first stage. It was necessary but not sufficient to win, to calm things down. In order to win, you had to have a platform and a programme that is attractive to a majority or a large number of people. And that's something that I'm afraid I think we're still working on. If you look at the polls, I mean, it's interesting to me that the polling situation now isn't that different from what it was at the end of 2022.
Yes. He's not really moved the dial at all.
Well, I don't think he has.
So what should he do?
So I've written about this, and I'm very keen that this should happen. I don't think there's any chance of us getting back in to government simply just by more steady she goes.
No.
I think there's got to be something. There's got to be something that's attractive to
Boldness,
voters.
Rather than caution.
A little bit. I mean, in a way, if the criticism against what Liz and I were trying to do was that it was too much too fast, I think the danger is that you overcorrect and do not very much, very slowly, as it were.
Yes.
And I think there has to be a middle way.
Well, give me some examples, like the budget, for instance, seems to be this kind of,
Yes.
everything's resting on the budget. If he doesn't pull a rabbit out of the hat on March the 6th.
I think there has to be some attractive offer.
What should the rabbit look like?
Look at broadly at the Conservative Party, all through my life, two of the principal things that Conservatives should be fighting for are lower taxes and secure borders, strong on immigration and strong on taxes.
Well,
and
would you like to see an immigration cap?
Yes. I mean, there's got to be something on it. I mean, on two of those metrics, we haven't, frankly, performed very well.
No.
And I've been involved with that. Other people have been responsible for that.
If you were going to cap immigration, what would you put it at? It's currently at 745,000.
So just as a matter of fact, when I stood in 2010, our policy was tens of thousands. That's what David Cameron said. And if 14 years later you've got 745,000, that's a problem. You've clearly not done what you said you were going to do.
What should they say, 200,000?
I think they should. I think they've got to work towards a cap.
Yeah.
And they've got to try and be convincing about it.
And on taxes, IHT, income tax, NIs, what would you look at bringing down?
So we did NIs, and if you remember, Liz Truss campaigned on reversing the NI tax increase, which we successfully did. And the other thing that she campaigned on was not increasing corporation tax. Now, I think my problem, was that we brought in too many other things in the mini budget. If we just stuck to those two things and shown some restraint on saving at the same time, I don't think any of the
But tell me one tax
happened.
that you think Jeremy Hunt should reduce in March.
Well, I would say, looking at where we are with corporation tax, I don't think that should increase. And I also think thresholds for inheritance tax should be increased.
Right.
Because simply there's a lot of drag in that. Okay. And clearly a lot of people, particularly in the southeast, particularly Tory areas, are having to pay inheritance tax on properties that their parents might have spent all their lives working
Although
for.
there's another argument that it doesn't actually affect that many people, inheritance tax.
I think it's
people have a perception it will affect them, but it doesn't.
That's right, it doesn't. But the people it does affect, it affects quite seriously.
How about the freezing of tax rate bands? Should they be unfrozen? I mean, fiscal drag's a massive problem.
It's a huge problem, and the reason why it's there is because the OBR obviously scores things and says, well, look, you can't, the economy isn't growing. That's the fundamental problem. And in order to raise tax revenue, it's easy to do it in a stealth tax way and simply just freezing the bands.
Should they be unfrozen?
And I think you've got to look at that. I mean, if you look at the way in which the 40% rate was introduced all those years ago, that was a top rate of tax. People who are paying 40% were a very small proportion of wage earners. Today, so many people are brought into that tax bracket. And clearly, if inflation's running very high and you stick to those tax bands, that level, more and more people are going to pay more tax.
What do you make of reports that the Tories should bring back Boris?
Well, I think, in a way, and I've always been a big Boris fan because I've seen him campaign so many times so effectively. I mean, he won the mayoralty twice, he won Brexit, he won the Tory leadership, he won that general election. And people could say there were lots of other factors, of course there were, but he had a very good success as an electoral force. And I think saying, he should come back is a sign that, things are very difficult.
But do you think Rishi should call him? That's the suggestion in the Sunday Telegraph, that Johnson's waiting for a phone call. Because you said that he's not very good at reaching out to him.
My view is, if you want somebody's help, you should reach out to them.
Yes.
That's what you would do.
Yes.
If you were in a difficult spot and you wanted a friend to help you or somebody to help you, you would probably pick up the phone.
Well, he might not want to admit that he needs the help from his former nemesis.
There's all of that ego and nonsense. But you have to be realistic. We're 20 points behind and the polls haven't really moved in the last year.
Yeah.
So it's not time simply to more of the same.
No.
Something has to change for us to have a chance of winning. And if that means swallowing some pride and, suppressing a bit of ego and reaching out to someone who's an approved campaigner, then he should do that.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Kwasi Kwarteng, for joining us this morning. Lovely to speak to you.